Uh, Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Public Safety Committee. We're going to be discussing the FY21 Savings Plan. And I'd first like to, as we begin, publicly thank Susan Farag for all of her hard work each and every time that she's with the Public Safety Committee, but especially on this one. This one is not pleasant in any way, and it's never fun to be doing these types of things, but as always, she has done a marvelous, marvelous job. And with that, Ms. Farag, if you would like to lead us through, please.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. As Councilmember Katz indicated, this is the proposed savings plan from the county executive for all the public safety agencies. It would be total $13.38 million and impacts 8 agencies. I do want to recognize this is the first year that the Office of Animal Services stands alone as an independent office, and it did in fact get dinged in the savings plan. I've set up this packet similar to prior savings plans, staff reports, and there's a list of manageable items on page 2 for your consideration. Council staff believes that these are not all necessarily easy cuts, that they will be manageable within the respective departments. And I did want to let you know that I did take COVID considerations into account when looking at these different items. Some of them are actually easier, like in corrections, lapsing the alternative community service work crew program for 6 months. They're not out working anyway. So some of those are easier due to COVID. Some might be a little more challenging. There is one that I wanted to bring to your attention in the sheriff's budget, which is reducing operating expenses for the contractual security officers. It's my understanding that this would cut security officers at courthouse entrances. I'd like to know how this would impact operations at the courthouses. If it makes it slower for people to get into court, will that have some sort of impact on social distancing requirements required by COVID? And also, how does this relate to how the courts are opening back up again? So if Judge Greenberg and Sheriff Popkin could speak to that and what type of impact this particular cut would have, that would be very helpful.
I can begin, Sheriff, if that's all right. First of all, as I'm sure the sheriff would tell you, we have three traditional entrances to the courthouse, and we've closed one of them until further notice. So to that extent, there won't be people manning those stations, is my understanding. Darren, you agree with me?
Yes, Judge.
All right.
Okay.
And then with regard to the number of people coming in the courthouse, as you may know, we are phasing through the reopening according to a schedule set out by Chief Judge Barbera. And actually, July the 20th, this coming Monday, is the beginning of phase 3. And that's the so-called public opening, although it really isn't that. It just simply means that services that were not previously available to members of the public are being made available to the public. But we're still encouraging remote hearings so that we won't have litigants and attorneys in the court. People can't just walk in the door unless they're there for an in-person hearing, which we hope will be rare, or they've made an appointment to look at a file or obtain a license or something of that nature. So in kind of a long-winded answer, I don't think there are going to be long lines of people waiting to get into the courthouse. But to the extent that there would be, and we're socially distancing them, it would probably take a little bit longer to get in the courthouse than has been the case in pre-pandemic times, because we ask some questions of them. We take a non-invasive temperature as well and ascertain that they have a mask. And we have some different procedures for screening them and the items that they're carrying into the court, which would add a little bit of time. But Darren, I think you and I might concur in this. I don't think the traffic is going to be substantially increased come Monday, and it will continue in that phase until at least August 31st, at which time we go into a new phase, and then finally it's anticipated that we'll be open completely October 5th, and frankly that may be a pipe dream, but that's what we're being told at this point.
Yes, Susan, absolutely everything that Judge Greenberg just mentioned, I concur with. Judge Greenberg and I have been in the in the courthouse, every day for the last 4 months throughout this public health crisis, and have been talking every day regarding all of the matters surrounding the security of the courts, the employees, the social distancing, Judge Barbera's overall court order that applies to all courts in Maryland. And really, frankly, Judge Greenberg has done a spectacular job with the court, circuit court here, and Judge Mitchell in district court. That one cut that we said that we would try to manage, certainly the security officers, also is helpful that we will maintain only 2 entrances to the courthouse for security purposes. We are watching that on a daily basis with the necessity of limiting who comes in the building, because typically there's anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 people using this building on any given day pre-COVID. So the potential for keeping people separated and all the large jury trials that go on with the large attendees in the courtrooms made it frankly impossible to social distance. So between conversations with Judge Greenberg, his court order, Judge Barbera's court order, I believe that cut is manageable at least through the end of this upcoming fiscal year, to be able to make sure that we maintain appropriate security in and around for the judges and the other employees and residents of the county who use the building.
Okay, great. With that feedback to the committee, I'm not recommending any change, and to leave this item on the manageable list on page 2. 2 other departments warrant further, more in-depth discussion, and that's the fire department and police. And I'm going to start with fire. Fire has 4.
If I could just interrupt for 1 second. So
sure.
You're suggesting, or you're saying that the circuit court, the $501,935 is what you're suggesting, and I don't know whether Judge Greenberg wants to stay for the entire meeting, but if that's where the committee will be, perhaps he's welcome to stay. Don't get me wrong, Your Honor, but and I know he's always interested in every word we've ever said. But if that's the case, I'd like to dispense with that as we go through. What is the recommendation or the feeling of the committee, please?
I agree with the staff recommendation, Mr. Chairman.
I do as well.
Thank you both. That's a 3-0. Thank you, Your Honor. It's always good to see you.
Pleasure seeing all of you. Stay well, everyone.
Do the same, please.
Right. Thank you.
So now, Susan, if we can go back, please, we'll dispense with that one. Okay.
Okay, well, I just put the manageable items on one list for your review, but I'm happy to go through these items individually if you had specific questions. Otherwise, I was just going to move on to the fire department.
Well, I think probably what we should do is go through, because we have other people at the committee. Why don't we go through and dispense with them, and then we can go to the areas that are going to take longer to discuss.
Okay.
So let's start with animal services, please.
Sure. The one item here, they have 3 items that are proposed for reduction, including lapsing an adoption supervisor position, reducing overtime, and reducing operating expenses across all programs. That was a popular item in budgets. So they're just agreeing to meet certain savings, but it hasn't really been specified yet exactly what each department will cut in their operating expenses. The one question I did have was lapsing adoption supervisor position, how that would be handled, particularly within the context of COVID and trying to adopt animals out. And if Mr. Koenig wanted to speak to that, that would be great.
Well, thanks, Susan, and thanks for all your help with this. The adoption supervisor position is obviously proposed for the cut, and we're going to, with the COVID circumstance and our opening and delays in opening, we're going to be going into adoption programs that are going to be more regimented with appointments than having just free walkthroughs by the citizens, so that we can control the number of people because we have staff, volunteers. We put a plan together that would incorporate all of them, plus citizens coming in to find an adoptable pet. That will require staffing overall for a 5, 6, 7 day period, but being down to one position is manageable at this point. If we go back to full open to the public, where everybody can go where they want to go, or how many people, we are a petting zoo, if you didn't know that. People come in just to take a look at the animals because they didn't have anything to do for the afternoon. But obviously that's going to go away. But I think it's manageable to this point, and I don't see us being out of this for some time. So the plans we have in place, I think as we move forward, as long as we are controlling the number of people coming in, we're going to be able to control like the number of adoptions and how many people we need for that.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Koenig. Susan, was there anything else on this one?
Not with Animal Services. I was recommending approval of all of their cuts.
What is the pleasure of the committee?
For the staff recommendation, Mr. Chairman.
With staff recommendation, Councilmember Alvarez?
I agree. I would only add my kids have been lobbying me hard for a dog. I think every family's probably going through something similar right now. And I know, Mr. Koenig, there's been a record number of residents that have come forward to adopt animals and serve as foster families. And I just want to recognize the great work of your staff facilitating this. I think this has presented a silver lining for a number of the pets that we have here in our community. So appreciate all your efforts, and do reluctantly take the staff recommendation for the reduction this time.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Koenig, and please thank everybody on your staff as well. So that's a 3-0. We're now going to go to consumer protection, please.
Yes, this lapse is one vacant investigator 2 position, which unfortunately was their auto expert position. I talked to Director Freeman about this a little bit. As you know, they have been historically short-staffed, and they rely heavily on this expertise. But he is able to manage this cut, and I believe he and both of his deputy directors are online if they wanted to speak to this a little bit more.
Good afternoon, President Katz and honorable council members. We're happy to be one of the savings plan warm-up departments of the bigger agencies. We're very happy that the county executive saw fit to make this a 6-month only lapse. We hope to fill the position. Just would like to point out that the automotive expert for the Montgomery County Consumer Protection Office and for the whole county is a huge asset. As you know, automobile repair complaints are very technical and complex. It's certainly been a great asset. We will manage in the interim and hope to fill the position at another time.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead, Susan.
I'm just recommending approval of that cut as well.
Well, and thank you. And let me just say, Mr. Friedman, that you all do an unbelievably good job for Montgomery County, and it seems that we never catch up with you. That it's always, we know you do a wonderful job, and we know you need more, and we know this, but we're just going to take this little bit from you this year and never give it back. That's basically what we've done over the years, and you still manage to do a fabulous job. And I am reluctantly going to agree with these reductions as well, but at some point, the county needs to step up to the plate and figure out what's really fair so that you, as great a job as you do, so that you can even do a better job for the public. You serve all of us so very well. So anyhow, I'm reluctantly in agreement to the committee members.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. President.
Yes, both. Very good. Yes, did you? Go ahead. Vice President.
I guess I agree with everything you said, Mr. Chairman. I don't want to just sort of say this every year and then not do anything about it. And we do say it every year, particularly with this department, which does a great job. And I only hear great things from constituents about. And I know they don't have the staff to meet the demand that's out there. And I think, under at these times, there's the amount of scams that are out there have not dropped off like many other things have. I can go along with the cut. I wanted to just suggest later on we're going to be talking about adjustments to the police force, and there is an interest in moving some complaints that don't require an armed officer to other departments. And I would suggest that we look at maybe if we're cutting any of the particularly the auto enforcement positions in the police, possibly transferring one of those positions over to deal with autos and towing, which I get a lot of complaints about. Putting a position like that under the Office of Consumer Protection, I think, might make some sense if it makes sense to Mr. Friedman.
We work closely with the police department and Chief Jones, and we're interested in discussing anything that you might have in mind.
Thank you. So I think it's 3-0 at this point, but I'd like to come back to that if there's an opportunity.
And I appreciate that. However, if you're transferring something to another group, that's not a reduction. So that's another part of what we're trying to discuss. But we'll stick with it. We'll stick with this one at this moment. Next is corrections and rehabilitation. Ms. Farag.
Yes, this has several cuts. Most of them are initially easy to take, increasing lapse, things like lapsing temporary office clerical, reducing office supplies, films, books, taxis, and travel. A couple of them I'd mentioned already that deal with COVID, like lapsing the ACS work crew for 6 months. There's also reducing electronic monitoring and reducing drug screening and labs in the pre-release center. I just wanted to let the committee know, if they weren't already aware, I get the daily population updates from the jail, and the pre-release and reentry center has been empty for quite some time. They made a concerted effort to reduce that population during the COVID crisis. So these cuts are much easier to take. There was, I did have some concern about reassigning security officer post at pretrial services. That was a security post when it was back at the other location that the National Institutes of Corrections recommended keeping. But since they've now combined locations with pre-release and re-entry, it's not any longer as significant. However, Director Talley can speak to these cuts. Again, I am recommending all as recommended by the executive.
Okay.
Ms. Talley, please.
All right. Good afternoon. Nice to see everyone. And so, yes, as Susan indicated, in 2016, we combined pretrial services and moved it from its Ardennes location, which was a facility shared with the police at that time that had 2 separate entrances. And once the police moved to their new headquarters on Edison Park Drive, we lost the police presence. And so we were maintaining 2 separate entrances with a significant defendant population who were reporting. And according to an NIC study, we did need to add an extra security presence and do other kind of security measures and updates to the facility that we did not own. And so in 2016, we moved pretrial services under the umbrella of community corrections and joined them at the pre-release center, which added significant security presence, as we already have 30 resident supervisors who serve in that function for pre-release services. We have a manned security post desk, doors that you cannot access without staff buzzing you in to enter. We also have additional security door to get back into pre-release services. And of course, we added lockers and a scanner, all measures to keep those out and keep property out, contraband specifically, out of the facility for everyone's protection. And of course, we have the right to not admit anyone who is not behaving in their best behavior, I would say, as they visit the center. And most people do comply because they want good reports to come back to the courts. And so we also have a home electronic monitoring specialist who will pick up the load and provide security rounds to that section of the facility. And we can also use our resident supervisor staff to also conduct security rounds in that section of the facility. And so we believe that we can manage that position. We deployed that officer early on. We took all of our special post assignments, whether that's the work crew assignments, our accreditation officers, and placed them back on the floor because we knew we would need security presence at detention services as we responded to COVID. And so they've been off the floor for a while. It's been since March when we deployed those officers back to the floor. And so we believe we can continue to manage that. When pretrial services opens fully, it's not 100% open. We will manage the flow and direction into that facility from our defendants. As indicated, pre-release and reentry services, we maintained the population. In March, we had maybe 114 people. We got down to about 20 people into June. And so everyone was either release time served or early released. And so we did fold the rest of those participants into the jail to be able to deploy staff further because we are doing remote court hearings to eliminate as many transports as we can to the circuit and district court every single day as we try to as I said, respond to COVID and eliminate its presence inside the jail. The other cuts that you see are fees that are associated with pre-release services, electronic monitoring, drug testing screens, which, we will have these services once pre-release services is back operational. At this current time, there's only 68 people who are sentenced in the jail. Everybody else is pretrial status, and so we have to get through the court proceedings in order to get sentenced people in order to be able to move them to the next phases of their possible incarceration and into these programs. Our internship program that you see there, we can still offer unpaid internships to any eligible candidate once we have the programs operational.
Okay. Thank you. And of course, as you are certainly aware, Director, and you two are doing a great job, but we're always very concerned that as much as we need to find the savings, we cannot find something we can't do something that is unsafe. So
right.
if there's any situation where you believe that for the least part of a moment that we need to be looking at something in addition to what we're doing, then please do not hesitate. It's for the safety of everyone, for the safety of the personnel, but it's certainly for the safety of the people that are in the jail as well. So we need to make certain. So please keep that in mind.
Yes, we have. Thank you.
We'll certainly go along with this. There again, we can use the word reluctant on every one of these. Councilmember Abernathy and Councilmember Vice President Hucker, where are you on these?
Reluctantly agree.
Me as well.
Okay.
Okay, that's a 3-0. Susan, next is fire and rescue. Do you want to?
Let's go to sheriff and state's
That's
attorneys
okay.
first.
Yeah.
Yes. So we'll finish up the remaining piece of the sheriff's proposed cuts. This involves a client assistance specialist position, which they have indicated to me is vacant now and will remain vacant through FY21. However, permanently losing that position would create a severe overload for the remaining staff and possible delays in client services. Their other item was cutting their recruit classes, and they had 8 budgeted for FY21, and they would cut that by 4. So they've got 4, I believe, starting this month in the summer class, but would not provide any in the winter class, if that's correct. And I was recommending approval of those cuts as well.
Sheriff?
Thank you, Councilmember Katz. So, as you know, during the last 4 months, the Family Justice Center, Montgomery County's Domestic Violence Center, has been open and operating the entire time. And as a matter of fact, the domestic violence calls never stopped, during this public health crisis. So, every person that came in here received the appropriate services. We never had any sort of reduction. People came to work. We did have one client assistants who work with the domestic violence survivors who come through the door. She did leave to take another position somewhere out of the area with her family, I believe. And so that position is currently vacant at the moment. Based on the COVID health crisis and the ability to telework and assign work out for the domestic violence victims who come in, I believe we can absorb that at least through the end of June of next year. But that, as things start reopening back to normal, it will be important for that position, extremely important for that position to come back. I wish I could tell you that there was no need for it, as you know, for domestic violence purposes, but unfortunately that need still exists.
Someone needs to be on mute. There we go. First off, thank you very, very much, Sheriff, for all that you do and for your comments as well. And there again, I would certainly go along with this, and the word reluctant keeps coming up, but candidly, we all know that domestic violence calls have gone up. I mean, Chief Jones has certainly mentioned that to us, and we're all aware of that. And if it is needed, then please do not stand on ceremony. Let us know, because we pride ourselves on the fact that we have one of the family justice centers and the best family justice centers in America, and we're not going to let that slip through in any way. So please keep that in mind. If there's something that needs to be done, keep us informed.
Yeah, and I appreciate, as has always been the council's, all of the council members' support for the Family Justice Center. It is providing an exceptional service to people who are really in need. So, I will 100% come back to you if there is an issue, but I do believe that, based on the current phasing of things, that we will be able to absorb this. But, certainly as of next year, the fiscal year, I will certainly keep you an update on that topic.
Thank you. Council members Hucker and Albornoz, where are you, please?
I agree, Mr. President.
I agree with that stipulation that we be kept abreast and not endanger our service. Thanks.
Thank you. That's a 3-0. And Sheriff, as always, you're welcome to hang around the meeting too if you like.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Talk to you. So we're going to go to State's Attorney next?
Yes. So the first couple of cuts that are listed for the State's Attorney are lapsing an Assistant State's Attorney 3 position and a Program Manager position. The State's Attorney position will become vacant in August, and I believe the Program Manager will become vacant in November, and they are both in the Prosecution Management Division. The work of both of those employees will be absorbed using existing staff for FY21. They're also proposing a lapse of an Office Services Coordinator in FY21, and they are taking additional turnover savings and printer project savings, which is just a change to a more efficient way of printing, which will save money. I'm recommending approval of all of these. I know that Lisa Russo is on the line. If you have any questions, I'm not sure about the State's Attorney John McCarthy himself.
I don't see his name.
Okay.
Ms. Russo, did you have anything else to add?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Thank you. There again, we can use the word reluctant, but and on this one, I believe you're going to have to keep us informed because once the courts do reopen, I mean, their backlog, from what I understand, is unbelievable. And whether or not, I don't know how you're going to work through the backlog, but please keep us informed on that as well.
I will, and I'll pass that on to Mr. McCarthy as well. His apologies for not being here this afternoon.
Not a problem. Council members Albornoz and Hucker?
Agreed.
Okay.
Thanks.
Agreed. Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Russo. All right, Susan, so we're going to go back to Fire and Rescue first, or?
Fire and Rescue, they have 4 items total proposed, 3 of which I put on the manageable list, and I'm recommending for approval. We could go through those briefly if you would like, or we can go directly to the recruit class.
Whichever way you believe is the most efficient.
Well, the 3 items on the manageable list are cutting officer training courses, a company officer leadership academy, and restructuring the IT section, which all are manageable, in my opinion. But if you have any questions, the chief obviously can respond to those, and then I can move into the recruit class issue.
Chief, please.
Well, thank you, Susan, and thank you, President Katz and other council members. As Susan outlined in the packet, the officer training and the company officer leadership academy, it's a ongoing process that a group was assembled back in the fall to reevaluate our officer training process and focus those training modules that we have, which we're currently using state level training classes, to a MCFRS specific training module, and have that incorporated with a potential regulation or certification and training change to courses that would be required prior to the promotional exam. So this change is in light of that, and just propels us a little bit further ahead than what we had already gotten because of the focus lost during the COVID timeframe. The IT restructure is a planned work that was occurring through retirement, merging different parts of our IT section that are underneath the support services division into a more unified office, and that savings is from the vacancy of one position. So thank you for those things that we believe we can obtain and achieve without changes and loss to our members. And I'll let Susan pick up the group class discussion.
Okay. Okay, as mentioned before, the largest item in the Fire and Rescue Savings Plan is deferring the FY21 recruit class, both the start of the class from December to February, and reducing the number of recruits in the class from 57 to 37. As you know, as the committee is well aware, the department has had ongoing structural unbudgeted overtime issues, running a deficit with cost overruns of about $8 million or so a year over the past several years, and projected overtime costs remain relatively stable and predictable, but they far exceed what's actually appropriated for services. As you know, fire operations in large part require minimum staffing to safely and timely respond to calls. And again, there was a county stat report that determined that fire and rescue needs an additional 180 firefighter positions to meet minimum coverage requirements without using overtime. And of course, it's completely inefficient not to use any overtime, but the department's trying to get to a more reasonable mix of both career staff positions and overtime. County executive added 20 new firefighter positions in FY20. We should start seeing some impact of them on overtime, but none were approved in the FY21 due to our knowledge that revenues were going to tank, unfortunately, and we didn't approve new positions in FY21. According to OMB, delaying and reducing this class would have a net savings of approximately $1.6 million in FY22, but result in $1.7 million in additional overtime in that out year. And again, this adds to the structural overtime deficit, and much of this has been driven by recruit classes being abolished or significantly reduced in prior budgets and savings plans. For example, the fire department lost 30 recruits out of 42 in its class in FY10. It had 0 budgeted recruits in FY11, and they also lost all 35 recruits budgeted for FY16. And again, these have been a significant factor in the unbudgeted overtime that the fire department is experiencing today. So for those reasons, and because of the ongoing structural budget overtime problems that they're having, I'm recommending not cutting any of these positions and keeping all 57. The delay is fine. That would save approximately $750,000 if you chose to take that. However, since I do recognize it's like the largest part of their savings plan proposal, if the committee chose in an alternative to cut only 10, the savings would be approximately $600,000. If you only cut 10, it more aligns with attrition. I've had 2 different figures, and the chief needs to correct me on this. I've heard 40 firefighter positions for FY21, but I've also heard 48. So the chief has the most updated numbers on that. But to the extent possible, I believe the fire department's recruit classes should try to cover at least attrition for FY21.
So for Susan's question about attrition, it does run just shy of 4 people a month in our attrition factor. So we've been using 3 in prior years, but our numbers have actually inched up a tad. So using that 4 number, 48 a year is what our attrition loss would be. So a recruit school of nearly that number would be offsetting the natural attrition for the year. The number varies based upon the known retirements that we have, and then we have the disabilities and the unplans. But again, our number of trending retirements is roughly about 4 a month. So 48 is an annual figure there.
Okay. So Susan, to be clear, you're recommending that we do not cut in its entirety, and that we consider reducing the class size by 10 recruits rather than 20 for half the savings of the. You're saying it's close to 600.
Yeah, I'm trying to clarify the savings. The actual delay of the class from December to February saves about $750,000. So the delay is fine. And the chief can speak to this better. than I can, but I think even if they ramped up everything 100% now, they're still going to have a little bit of a delay getting that class started. So there would be $755,000 of savings anyway. I was recommending not taking the 20 recruit cut, but again, I understand this is the most significant piece of their savings plan. So in the alternative, if you just wanted to cut 10 recruits, that would reduce savings by about $600,000 from that entire budget item.
So I understand it's either or. It's the 750 or whatever that number would be, or the 600,000 is what you're suggesting.
No, it would be a combination. If you only cut 10 positions instead of 20, total savings would be about $1.35 million.
10 rather than 20.
Correct.
Let me take a second and expand on what Susan outlined. The original 57 positions, let me go one more step backwards. Our recruit school is 26 weeks in time and tenure. So we are full 6 months of time in the academy to start to finish. We had originally planned and were originally budgeted for the 57 recruits for an entire 26 weeks in the physical year. So those recruits had to start in December and were budgeted to graduate in the June timeframe, thus the original allocation for all of FY21. Prior to the savings spending plan adjustments, through the COVID impact, we did an entrance exam in February of 2020. The other steps in process to move forward were halted based upon COVID, social distancing, gathering issues, and everything related to that. We are in the ready stage to send out invitations to just shy of 500 people to advance forward in the physical agility evaluation and mentoring process. That is a prescribed 12-week process. So if we started that now and gave them a communication in the next week or two to start in the middle of August, we would be throughout the entire months of August, September, October, before we finished up that 12-week process at the end, shall we say, to the middle of October. Plus another month and a half for the OMS and the doctor medical physical exams, we would not make the December timeframe for starting a class. We'd be very much aiming for the best case example of February to start that recruit class, which is why the delayed implementation timeframe is an appropriate schedule now based upon our COVID impact. And the number of recruits is the variable that Susan is really outlining in the proposal packet, and that's what OMB and Fire Rescue has been talking with Susan about. As the start of class will not be December by no means, and the best case is February, which then impacts 26 weeks later. They would be graduating in an August timeframe of next year.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. I'm going to go along with the 10 rather than 20, and I think that's the most sensible that we can do. But to my other committee members, where are you, please?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'm comfortable with that. I'm comfortable with restoring the whole thing. I mean, overtime is a huge percentage of their budget, and it's something we've said we were going to address for years. Filling the recruit class avoids digging the hole deeper. Susan, I think, said we're, 180 positions short of full coverage?
It's now 160. Yes.
Okay, 160. But that's significant, and I know we're not going to fix that problem, but I'd rather avoid making it worse. And if we're doing it to produce savings, according to Susan's packet, the savings of $1.6 million that causes overtime costs of $1.7 million is not really savings, but it causes other problems. And then finally, we're having this protracted discussion of reshaping our public safety paradigm and redefining public safety. And we're talking about transferring some calls from police, we currently go to police, to a medical and fire and rescue providers. So it seems like an unwise time to cut short our complement of EMTs.
You know, I agree with you from the think of it. I do. I think that's right. I don't think we should be cutting anything in this. I really don't. We've gone through that, and we're going to get to Councilmember Roberts. We have gone through this each year,
right.
And when when County Executive Elrich was sitting on this committee, just like we are, he fought the fight just like we are. So I do believe you're right. I think that this is penny wise and pound foolish. Councilmember Roberts.
I guess, Chief Goldstein, we have received briefings before on the challenges with recruitment, and I think that plays into this as well. Can you talk a little bit about the process that you've undertaken to get to the numbers that you're trying to get to in terms of the recruitment of the next class?
Correct. So as we said, the February 28th, 29th, I believe, was the entrance exam that I referenced. That was our smallest applicant pool to record, and we left that open for an additional week or two to get the pool up to the point it was. So the objective of hiring from that applicant pool, when you're looking at a 20 or 25% entrance to result ratio, we're definitely looking to 400 to 500 people into the process with the objective of getting that, nearly 75 to 100 eligible for hiring. So as we progress with what has been and continues to be my goal of an annual entrance exam process, we're always able to outline to any applicant when the exam will be. We're always able to date that's going to be in the January timeframe and always give them that objective versus the vague answer of we don't know when we're going to hire again, which is critical to being able to communicate. But as with all of our public safety partners, the interest is definitely getting smaller, and the challenges of taking those, as I said, just shy of 500 people and succeeding with sitting a class of up to potentially 57 folks as currently forecasted or revised, that's definitely the best case scenario, as the quality and the skills of our applicants are ones that we have to and we do take a very critical eye on.
So I think, Mr. President, I agree with both of you. I think that taking any of this reduction right now would put us in a weakened position, both from a public safety standpoint, but also a compromised position overall from a staffing standpoint. And we are aggressively trying to add measures to add housing here in the county to bring more people here. And so we need to have the infrastructure to go along with that. And as we look at our aging population, I think it's very important for us to maintain a reasonable level of our fire and rescue squad. So I don't know where the reduction is going to come from otherwise, but I think in this specific instance, I agree with both of you.
Okay. Susan, so that's a 3-0.
Okay, so my understanding is you still delay the class for a savings of $755,000.
Yes.
But you maintain the 57 recruits.
Yes.
Okay, great.
And that's both of you in agreement with your understanding? Okay. Okay, and now, thank you, Chief. And now to the other Chief Jones. Susan, will you lead us through, please? Chief,
sure.
welcome.
The last item today is the police budget, and the recommended reductions in the savings plan for the police department total $8.54 million. That's about 3% of the department's approved FY21 operating budget. This reduction reflects the abolishment of 27 sworn police officer positions. Of those, 2 sergeant positions would be civilianized, and an additional 6.5 civilian positions would be abolished. Further, they have 2 civilian positions that would be lapsed for 6 months. Now, initially, when I read this, I was going to recommend, and what is reflected in the packet is recommend not abolishing any sworn positions. And my reason for that was that you've got at least 3 entities who are currently looking and examining in depth the delivery of public safety services to the community. You have the Reimagining Public Safety Task Force, you have MCPS looking at school resource officers, and the Council's Policing Advisory Commission is slated to start its work in September. And my rationale here was to preserve these positions and the full sworn complement of 1307 officers until you get real recommendations back from these entities. And then you can resize and appropriately reconfigure the police department as the chief feels is the best way to provide these services and delivery and expectations of the community. It's harder to hire. Again, it could take up to 2 years if you needed additional positions. And while I understand the push is to not have as many officers in the community in certain circumstances, there are other circumstances where there may need to be flexibility to reassign officers. And one of those is traffic enforcement, which we will discuss in a little bit. However, I've been going back and forth with OMB and the police department all last week. And instead of abolishing these positions, they can take them as laps. This is with the understanding that they expect these positions to be abolished in the FY22 operating budget. At this point, the laps, my recommendation has changed that you accept this savings as laps. That will achieve the savings that was proposed in the savings plan, but it will also preserve those sworn positions in case you need them at a later point. And I did want to put on page 4, there is a list of the positions that would be impacted. Most of these are filled positions. The ones I know that are vacant are the 5 middle school SROs. They have not been assigned yet. And that would actually, I believe, require a change in the memorandum of understanding among the school and the other stakeholder entities within that MOU. So those are relatively easy to lapse. But the way that lapse will work, and Chief Jones and Neil Shorb can correct me if I'm wrong, since these other positions they're talking about the sworn positions are mostly filled, they're not going to stop doing that work. As other police officer positions open up through attrition and retirement, then the department has agreed to take those as savings in order to meet their targeted savings point for this savings plan. So they have approximately, their attrition rate is approximately 2 officers per month. They currently have 40 vacancies. The recruit class 70, just graduated yesterday, and they are expected to take 20 of those vacancies. You have another January class that should take the other 20. There's also at least 16 in the drop for FY21. And so those would be the positions that would provide the flexibility to achieve the savings without necessarily reducing the services listed on page 4. And this is something that I'd like Chief Jones to speak to, because most of these positions are taken from currently functioning areas, but there's also some that are taken from his reimagined vision of how the department would be aligned to better meet community services and expectations.
What would be the dollar figure that you're talking about if you did it the way you just said it?
If you lapse everything, you get the 8.54 million.
How much?
The 8.54 million, the entire thing. I'm not recommending any reductions elsewhere. So the current savings plan for the police department is 8.54 million. If you take it all as lapse, it's not easy to do. It's not an easy feat by any means to take that lapse, but they could achieve the savings that the county executive proposed without abolishing positions.
Okay. Chief, did you comment? Would you like to comment, please?
So good afternoon, council members and President Katz. So I just wanted to make sure that we have some clarity in some areas. As you're all aware, that I did propose to the county executive a reorganizational plan to focus on traffic safety from a centralized traffic unit to focus on many of our major highways in Montgomery County and our hotspots as we work in this Vision Zero program. So as a result of that, we are basically taking all of our traffic units that are that are assigned to our district stations, bringing them together as one centralized traffic section. And even all of those units wouldn't have necessarily gone to that particular centralized position because we only had enough slots for about 24 officers outside of supervisors. So what we did was we actually had assigned 2 officers per district except the second district in Bethesda, which we gave them 3 to provide them with a traffic complaint officer to deal with our traffic complaints in our neighborhoods, our school zones, and other areas that need specific issues directed at things such as pedestrian safety, speeding, or running red lights or stop signs. So with that being said, we then in this plan we are taking away 2 officers from our centralized traffic section, and we would be again lapsing if that is the plan of this committee to propose that we would then either lapse or abolish again those 6 officers, 1 from each district, as a traffic complaint officer that would bring their numbers down to either 1 or 2. Our patrol investigations unit is that's assigned to our 5 district stations. 5 of the 6. The first district does not have a patrol investigations unit at this time. So we decided that each of those stations have 2. They handle mostly theft from autos, but they also handle other types of crimes that may require more extensive investigations that come out of our patrol divisions that are do not meet the criteria for our district detectives to handle those types of investigations. So we'd be taking 1 of those from each of our districts in that regard. We'd also be taking 1 officer from our collision reconstruction unit that handles all of our fatal collisions. Those are extensive investigations. As you know, it's like a homicide investigator to some degree that are responsible for all of our pedestrian and traffic fatal collisions or near fatals in the county. And as we work towards other positions such as civilianizing our sergeant, 1 from the evidence unit that oversees all of our evidence, as well as sergeant over our background section, that we could civilianize those positions and reallocate those sergeants to other positions. And then the other part would be to look at abolishing the central auto theft unit section. That section has been in place for probably somewhere around close to 15 to 20 years. We would basically remove the sergeant, abolish the sergeant and corporal from that unit, and reassign the investigators to our district stations. 5 of the district stations, we would reallocate them and look towards having those positions assigned to the district station, where they would serve as the auto theft specialist for that particular district. We'd have to look at which district has the lowest. Our 2 districts have the lowest number of auto thefts, and 1 of those detectives may be assigned to both of those functions. And at the same time, as we see in many cases that individuals that are being involved in theft from autos are sometimes also involved in our auto theft cases. So there would be a connection to work at the district stations, to work with the patrol investigative unit investigator at those district stations, because those cases would align, and that would be a function that would be well served at that point in time. And the other, I think, 3 positions are, again, position from 1 from K9, 1 from our Special Operations Division Emergency Services Unit, and then again 1 officer from our SWAT unit. And then we have the other lapses that we would have as far as our civilian positions that would be the primary positions, and I can answer any questions as it relates to that.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Alvarez.
Thank you, Chief. I'll have a lot more questions later, but specifically with regards to auto theft. So if I'm hearing you directly, would it be better to decentralize the auto theft investigative approach to align with the districts? Is that actually a preferred method as opposed to the centralized, it sounds like, approach you have now?
Right.
And the reason I'm keenly interested in this is my neighbor had their car stolen 2 weeks ago.
Right.
And so and there have been a rash of incidents in the Kensington area over the last few months since COVID, which is interesting. You would think the opposite would happen. But so just curious as to if you could talk a little bit more about that strategy, if you think that actually would be more effective than a centralized.
So in some cases that might be the case, but as far as it being more effective, I think we could make an argument against the other, because what these investigators sometimes find is they find auto theft rings. These are people that are committed and committing auto thefts all across not only just Montgomery County, but also across the region, the Washington metropolitan region. And we work hand in hand with other auto theft units such as the District of Columbia Metropolitan Police Department, as well as Prince George's County, are two small examples of gathering information, sharing information of individuals who are going across their jurisdictional boundaries, committing these types of offenses. They also are involved in several high-value fraud cases that we've worked with, not only just these regional investigators, but we also have worked with federal law enforcement and as well as customs, as we watch individuals who are actually frauding car dealerships, as an example, and actually trying to ship cars overseas out of places like the Port of Baltimore. So while it creates some issues for us to kind of not necessarily totally lose that aspect, but still these investigators are trained to handle those types of investigations even at the district level. But it does require us to have a more localized, you might say, approach, particularly with some of these thefts that are occurring that are connected with some of the lower hanging fruit, you might say, with our theft from auto perspective.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you for allowing me to join the group today. I wanted to, before I turn, I have a couple questions on and proposals on the SROs, but on the auto theft, since it was just brought up. So if I'm clear, Chief, that those, Chief Jones, all of the people who are currently in auto theft would, through lapse, they would just be reassigned to the districts, and that includes the sergeant?
So what would happen is, Mr. Jawando, no, the sergeant would basically, he would not lose, quote, he wouldn't lose his job, but he would be removed out of that position and reassigned. But we would not, for example, the next vacancy for a sergeant would not be filled because that position would have been eliminated.
Got it. Understood. Thank you. I sent a memo to my colleagues this morning outlining a proposal to eliminate the SRO program as part of this savings plan, the School Resource Officer program, and use the vacancies that have been discussed and attrition that was also mentioned to lapse, and then abolish next year these positions. That would not require, similar to what's being proposed with the other positions, no one would be riffed or fired. They would just, these officers, the 23 that are currently active, my understanding, would be reassigned under this proposal. I did so because we know that the data of SRO arrests over the last 4 years, black youth are disproportionately been arrested. They've comprised about half of the students arrested in these schools. And even though they only compromise about a fifth of the population, that's much larger than even the national average, which also has similar disparities. And so I think this is the opportunity to do this. This is an important time as we're addressing and reimagining public safety and the role of police in schools. I've mentioned we have one of the worst nurse to student ratios and counselor to student ratios in the region. And we've tried to address that, but this is a connected problem. And I think we need to take this opportunity to get this savings right now. The other thing I'll say, OMB has forwarded a lot of data, some of which Ms. Farag mentioned about the capacity to do this with current vacancies and attrition. I think that's a unique opportunity. Also, I think we need to understand that right now, school is not going to start at a minimum until November. And so one of the questions I do have, regardless of what action is taken here today of the committee and then at the full council, I think this presents a unique opportunity for us to look at a new option and model. As the school board is looking into those options, I think we can take this step and lapse these positions and reinvest in things like positive behavioral interventions and supports and other evidence-based alternatives. Our restorative justice program, get that in every school. Make sure our school security officers have additional training. We don't need armed police officers in our school. And so I guess my question will be, this is the proposal I'm putting on the table on behalf of the committee. I know I don't have a voting committee, but I appreciate you all considering it. And obviously this will come to full council. My question for the chief would be, in light of the fact that schools aren't going to be opening at least until November, and obviously we're in a fluid situation with the global pandemic, what if these officers are not, if this program is not eliminated and they're not, that doesn't happen, what's the plan for these officers in the fall?
Well, thanks, Mr. Jawando. I would suggest to you that the plan would be very similar to what the officers have been doing since school was out. These officers have been very helpful and instrumental in helping to give out food to our young people for lunches during the week at several locations across the county. They've been able to also supplement the district stations to assist them where that has been needed during the COVID crisis. They continue, again, to have some positive impact with that and to provide any other assistance that they would need in regards to providing MCPS with the support they need with traffic support and other things as it relates to food distribution and the like.
Okay. And that obviously could happen even if the program was eliminated, because these officers would be reassigned at some point and they could still...
Well, that's not necessarily the case. That just depends on how that reallocation would actually go into play. We'd have to look at where the officers would be assigned as a result of this program being dismantled.
Okay.
So, these officers might have an option that they might want to apply for other jobs or go for other positions, and they may decide to go on another shift that would not cover the time frame in which they currently work. So there could be changes depending on that individual officer.
Sure. And the last thing I'll say is just for my colleagues' benefit. I mean, we're in a unique time, and I think the data is clear on this. The type of supports our students need, despite many good SROs who are great people, and I know many of them, they need other types of supports. The trauma, many of our students have reached out to me. All of our student members of the board think that this system should be ended. The American Federation of Teachers, the largest teachers union in the country, one of the largest, passed a resolution calling for the separation of school safety and policing. The time to do this is now, and I think this is an opportunity in light of the crisis to move forward. So that's what I wanted to say, Mr. President, or Mr. Chairman and Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Rice.
Well, thank you. I feel like this is going to be point counterpoint. And I love my good friend from the Education and Culture Committee, Councilmember Jawando, but I couldn't more fundamentally disagree with what he just said, which is very interesting. He said what our kids need. And I think that, again, in his conversations with youth, he certainly had some conversations. I've had some of those similar conversations. And I'm not going to put out who I had those conversations with, but certainly youth who are leaders in our community. And when I had Zoom calls with them in great detail talking about our school resource officer program, it was very interesting to hear what our youth had to say. So let me go to some quotes. He's a great officer. He's been very helpful for me. I don't really like opening up to people, but he actually helped me. Another one. Everybody finds him really cool. He makes us feel safe and doesn't act like he's the boss of the school, and that makes us feel more open to him. Another person. You know you're safe and you have someone to talk to. The interesting thing is that you hear safety, but in the same context of safety, you also hear about this conversation. And it's very interesting because just last night we heard on the Police Advisory Commission, one of the candidates talk about the fact that a police officer can't serve in that role. It's not possible for a police officer to serve as a person who's actually giving positive feedback and supporting our students. Well, I would say that that person's wrong because the voice of the students is very clear. And so if anybody wants to check up on these quotes, they're actually listed. It's on YouTube. It's in the story about Officer Joe Lowry, who's the school resource officer at Quince Orchard High School. I was there that day and saw the students directly and their interaction with them. And it's not any different from any of the interactions I've had with school resource officers as I've shadowed them multiple times throughout multiple jurisdictions, all the way from East County to West County, north to south. The reality is this, is that our school resource officer program, just like our police department, is not perfect. There is no question. But I will not be a person who advocates for taking something away that actually provides a benefit to a lot of students just because we need to make it better. I feel as though we can create a strong school resource officer program that actually works for our students. A lot of our students, and this was another quote from a person who actually testified as a part of the Police Advisory Commission last night, Luis Hernandez, who was talking about how what he thinks is that our students, all of our students, need to understand what the role of our school resource officer program is and what those officers are supposed to do. I completely agree with everything that that young man said last night. A lot of our students have no idea, have never interacted with, nor know who our school resource officer is. So we can get better. We can get better at making sure that we're ensuring the safety of our students and also providing an additional resource. I will tell you that my good friend Luis Cardona with the Street Outreach Network said something to me that always stuck with me, and it's a passion that he believes in. You can never have too many adults who can give a caring word to somebody and show a person that they care about them. There's no such thing as too many. And it's certainly something where having an officer who actually shows that they care about you and care about your well-being and also wants to help you is a tremendous plus that we're trying to achieve. If we're not going to eliminate our police department, I think it's incredibly important for us to make sure that we make a police department that works for our community, that's responsive, that's helpful, that people view as caring and supportive. And so again, I'm not vilifying Councilmember Jawanda or anyone else who says that they want to remove the school resource officer program. I would actually just like for us to pause. When he talks about data, the reality is that our arrests are at a record low. They're lower than they have ever been before. While our numbers still reflect a little bit higher in terms of the percentages as we see represented in our schools than we need to be, that's certainly something that we need to address. I will like to remind folks, however, that arrests will happen regardless of whether a school resource officer is there or not for arrestable offenses such as drugs, knives, and gun possession. Those are written into the school laws, and so from that, and school policy, excuse me. And so from that perspective, there are no gray areas. The reality is that I'd like to look at the data more and start to understand a little bit about the drug possession charges and understand what level of drug possession we're talking about, because those are discretionary arrests, those paper arrests that happen. We need to work on that and make sure that those are minimized. But that being said, we had 160 arrests. We have 160,000 students in Montgomery County Public Schools. 160. And that includes the arrest of people who brought guns to school who could have killed people. It includes that. 120 of those arrests were made by school resource officers. So even less were made by school resource officers that were actually there. 40 of those arrests were actually made by officers who were outside of the school, who were called in by school administrators. So again, are we chasing a problem? Or are we just trying to get better? I would hope that we try and get better. I would hope that we continue to deliver on that young lady who said, I don't really like opening up to people, but he actually helped me. I don't want to be a person who takes help away from a student. I don't want to be a person who denies a positive interaction with a police officer as we're trying to reimagine and re-envision our police force. That's not what I want for me. That's not what I want for my daughter. That's not what I want for my constituency. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilmember Albornoz.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I saw the memo this morning, Councilmember Joando. I appreciate you sending it. And I understand where you're coming from. And I have certainly reviewed and read many of the articles that you have referenced with regards to the practical reality when it comes to having officers within schools. And I'm also sensitive to the fact that for a large percentage of our population, the mere presence of a police officer exudes anxiousness and emotion, and can be a real challenge on a number of different levels. Having said that, and I've provided this context before, but I want to do it again because it's so important, I believe, to this discussion. For 12 years, I had the honor of serving as the director of the Recreation Department for the county, the largest provider of after-school programs in Montgomery County Public Schools outside of the school system itself. And we had programs in middle schools and high schools, and the school resource officers that our staff and our team interacted with on a daily basis were critical to the overall support structure of those schools. Oftentimes, the SROs referred students to those very after-school programs. We've had ebbs and flows of gang issues here in Montgomery County, and the SROs played a critical role in numerous instances in helping to address gang violence within schools. And I can recall numerous incidents in which we had students who were being preyed upon by MS-13, by local street gangs, who had nobody to turn to but the street outreach officer in their school who helped directly intervene and address the needs of that youth. And I also saw numerous instances in which conflict within a school that could easily have been escalated into fights after school and over the weekend was addressed immediately or followed up on by the school resource officers to help mitigate the situation. There were numerous instances in which they intervened in often very complex and sophisticated criminal rings that are occurring and that are preying upon a number of students that are particularly vulnerable in our schools. I also know that the school administrations rely upon these officers more than just a safety and security standpoint. They are members of their overall team. And so simply removing them, as an appendage from these schools is much easier said than done because they work within that ecosystem. And so at a minimum, I think that there needs to be a comprehensive evaluation and analysis looking at the data that you referenced, Councilmember Joando, which I'm very sensitive to. I mean, the data speaks for itself. But I think it's part of a much more complex story. And my understanding is that right now, the school system through the Board of Education is conducting a very comprehensive top to bottom up analysis of this program, engaging parents, school administrators, students, the school resource officers themselves, and other key stakeholders. And I think it would be premature, while acknowledging that it is a unique time because these officers have been redirected because of where we are with the pandemic. I just think that it would be wiser to conduct a comprehensive analysis based on the data that's being collected and based on the information that's being collected by the Board of Education before we take such a drastic step of outright eliminating the program. I just think that would be short-sighted. And so I would prefer that we wait until that analysis is complete, that we conduct, I know many of our colleagues are interested in this issue, and so it should be something that we consider looking at as a full council rather than just as the Public Safety Committee or a partnership between the Public Safety and Education and Culture Committee. But I also think that I am very open to, just as we are reimagining from a holistic approach how we're thinking about policing, I think it is appropriate for us to look at reimagining our SRO program. While I can speak in the first person about the training that they receive, because our team within recreation, I still refer to them as ours because my heart's still there, our team helped enhance the training of those officers by adding something called advanced youth development training, which the SRO officers absorb like sponges, and I think really appreciate it. And I know that there's also a tremendous amount of time spent on the front end by MCPD over the years to ensure that the recruits for this program are well equipped to address the unique needs of youth and address the unique communication needs of youth. And so I am not in favor of expanding the program. I think we should hit the pause button on expansion to any additional schools until that assessment is complete. But I just think it would be premature to entirely eliminate the program without the benefit of that complete analysis. And once that analysis is complete, looking at making recommendations on how we transition to a new model. And I know that it's been stated that if we eliminate these officers, that other patrol officers within the districts that patrol these schools could still respond to incidents as they arise. But the relationships that the SRO establish with those students are also very relevant. And I think there may be some significant unintended consequences if we then rely upon patrol officers, because those incidents that Councilmember Rice discussed involving firearms, they would have been arrested regardless of whether or not it was an SRO officer. And if it was a patrol officer who wasn't as familiar with these students, didn't have a relationship with the school administrators or the school, then a situation like that can escalate very, very quickly and become extraordinarily dangerous for everyone involved. And so for all those reasons, I'll state it one last time, I appreciate the memo written by my colleague and friend who I'm standing alongside of as we look at police reforms. But in this specific instance, I think we need to take our time and do this appropriately. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me jump in, please, and let me associate myself with and agree with Councilmembers Rice and Councilmember Albornoz. I appreciate your memo, Councilmember Juando. I sincerely do, and appreciate your thoughts and your passion on the topic. But I understand and seen firsthand a concern when someone sees a police officer. When they show up on the scene and people get nervous and don't like it, and in some situations I'm sure that happens inside and outside a school for young people, and in some cases things have not always been done the exact way they should have been done. Let's be realistic and truthful. But I also realize that when someone sees someone on a more regular basis, when someone realizes that someone wearing a uniform is not the enemy, but truly is a friend and a helpful friend, it becomes helpful as well. I used to always joke that there was a time in my life that when a judge would call me, I would break out into a sweat. I know doggone well I hadn't done anything wrong, but I broke out into a sweat because I was concerned why a judge would even speak to me, why he knew my name. And it was, now of course I'm friendly with many, many judges. I'm very pleased of that and very proud of that. But my point being that once I became familiar with the person, once the person became familiar with me, there was no longer that sense of concern each time for no reason that I had. And I go back to elementary school and know the times when the school patrol officer, the patrol, the person who was in charge of the patrols inside of school would see some, you know, would come to the sixth grade and check to see that your badge and belt was clean and you know, all of those things. And I know that there was a sense of pride with the children in that. And we've gotten further away from that in many cases. We used to have a DARE program where an officer would come into an elementary school and meet with students and talk about drug awareness and do all of these things that we, and because of budgets, we said, look, we can't afford it. We're not doing it anymore. And it's hurt us in many, many ways. Having said that, it's also very important to say that we need to correct what needs to be corrected, that we need to make certain that when we change things, and we will, and we're going to work together to do it, but when we change things, there has to be something in the place of what we've just changed. I always go back to John McCarthy when he said that when I guess it was Ronald Reagan 40 years ago, whatever it's been, when he said all the mental institutions should be open and the people inside those institutions should now be freed, should now be on the street. And when that happened, the Cook County, Illinois jail became the largest mental health institution in America. Because what we did, we didn't help people. We pretended we were helping people. What we did was we changed saying, okay, you're out on the street, gave people no resources, gave them no way to get themselves back on track, and didn't do the things that we needed to do that we should have done so that they wouldn't be incarcerated and not be in those situations. The bottom line on this whole thing is we need to change. We need to have a better system, but we need to do it sensibly. We need to do it in a comprehensive way, and we need to make certain that we're working with all segments of all of our partners: the public, the Board of Education, the police, and certainly our students, to see what does and doesn't work and come up with a system that will work. And so that's where I am. I appreciate all the efforts, and I appreciate the concerns. Councilmember Hucker, did you have anything to add on this one? And then I know Councilmember Joando had something that he wanted to add as well.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Well, I certainly, too, have heard concerns about SROs for years. I've heard complaints, from students and staff directly. I know they need to be on mute. But I know they were created with the best of intentions, and I know many individual SROs that that approach the job the right way and are there for the right reason. I got a few questions. I'm certainly struggling with whether they should be eliminated or how to fit it in, reaching that goal in with the analysis that's being done. Chief, what can you comment on the disparity in the arrest data and why you think that occurs and what you think ought to be done about it, if you do think something ought to be done about it?
So I think part of the issue here is, again, as I think Councilmember Rice noted about what's the school policy. We have a memorandum of understanding with the school system about what specific arrests can be made on school property, and what incidents are, again, brought to police attention should be documented. So, for example, the most serious offenses, as Councilmember Rice noted, he talked about weapon possession. He talked about in some cases, drug possession, right? He talks about, and I don't know if you mentioned, but robbery is one of those, incidents where a physical arrest is actually made on school property.
Right.
So in this year alone, and granted, this is a bit of an anomaly, but even if you take it to the end of February, we made 27 arrests in the entire school system that we took a student out of school. That's one arrest per high school. That's an average, okay? And then when you looked across at some schools, there were no physical arrests. Now, there are these other types of events, such as we have, investigating certain crimes such as assaults,
right,
which are victim crimes. We have thefts of cell phones, those sorts of things. So, so when it comes to, yes, I've talked to my staff about a reevaluation, maybe even talking to MTPS. And again, as has been noted by Councilman Albanaz, is the fact that we're having these discussions and work groups with MCPS as they prepare to report back to the Board of Ed, so that we can talk about maybe other ways of diversion or other things as it relates to dealing with those issues in our schools.
Okay. So you're is it safe to say you're troubled by the arrest disparity?
Well, I am troubled, but I mean, at the end of the day, I am troubled by the fact that, again, when I see some of these things that are brought to our attention, that who are bringing weapons to school, who are robbing other kids or doing some of the most egregious events, I am troubled by it. But the fact of the matter is we are not initiating the arrest from a standpoint that we're actually going through the school looking for individuals who are committing these offenses. These offenses are occurring, and then we're responding to address them accordingly along with the school system as a partner, and, working in hand in order to create a safe school.
Okay. Right. So it's your assessment is SROs aren't disproportionately searching or stopping black high school students looking for these things that then they're required to perform an arrest under the MOU.
Absolutely. In fact, there's this belief that our SROs are in our schools specifically to make arrests, and I am adamantly I oppose that thought process, because that's not the reason why school resource officers are placed in Montgomery County Public Schools, particularly our high schools. I've got SROs that are, all of them for the most part, are parents.
Right.
They care about kids, right? So at the end of the day, they're not going through the halls looking for kids to arrest each and every day.
Right. So one of the memos we received posited that removing SROs may actually lead to more arrests because your officers who are not now in the schools with relationships would be brought into those situations. Do you think that is the case, or it would not be the case?
Well, it could be, it's possible. And the reason why I don't want to say it's absolutely the case, because every situation is different.
Sure.
But what I'll tell you is that you can put a price on a relationship that an SRO has in a school that could particularly maybe even be able to diffuse a situation that it wouldn't lead to an arrest. There might, and in fact, I'll give you an example. I know of an SRO who does that all the time. I would say all the time, but who has made very limited to no arrests in his school, because he has a way of communicating with kids in a very effective manner.
Sure.
So,
what about the SROs on the other side of the spectrum that are probably making too many arrests? What happens with them, and how is that identified, and how is it cured?
Well, again, we work with MCPS. Anytime that we have complaints that might come from even the school officers, but again, understand, they're under these guidelines, okay? There's still guidelines that are directing them based upon this MOU. That, again, it might be that the individual, and again, we have to look at statistical data to look at the actual charges that are placed against our people particularly of people of color, look at not only statistics, but look at the facts of each case.
Right.
We need to look at each of these cases individually, breaking them down, looking at the SROs, and having a conversation with the school administrators, such as the school principals.
Right.
Who I can tell you, I've gotten very good reviews from many of my SROs and I've had school principals call me and ask me, please don't move an SRO who might get promoted. I mean, those things happen, right?
I've heard that too. How often is that MOU between MCPS and MPD revised? I didn't realize your officers are required to make an arrest if there's any drug possession or if there's even possession of a pocket knife.
Right. Well, no. There's weapons. There are certain weapons, right, such as a knife or a gun, right?
Yeah.
Those are mandatory arrests. When we talk about drugs, basically an officer will be called. Let's say it's marijuana.
Right.
The law still apply to the state of Maryland. The law. So if there's less than 10 grams, the student's not getting arrested, but the student could get a citation. Okay. And those drugs are confiscated. But the other serious offenses that we talked about, robbery, and those types of cases, or possession with an intent to distribute drugs, yes, those individuals, that's a mandatory arrest.
Okay. Susan, just two quick questions. How much is it the right assumption that all of if SROs came out of these high schools, that we benefit from all those savings? In an earlier discussion, some of that was grant funded, and we wouldn't be funds we could redirect to school nurses or something else.
I would have to check with the police department's budget person. I don't think any of them are grant funded. I did know that they received a grant in the spring, which was pulled back by the executive, that would have provided some funding. And also I know that the park police was looking to try to secure some grant funding too, and they were thinking about contributing an SRO to the program, but that was at least a year ago.
And then do we get an answer on what adequate law enforcement coverage means under the Safe to Learn Act?
I've been regularly checking at the state level to see if they've promulgated regulations, and so far they have not. So I'm assuming that's something that Chief Jones would decide, what he thinks is adequate to maintain safety at those schools. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councilmember Juwan.
All right. Quite a bit there. I'll try to be brief. There's been a lot of discussion about relationships, and relationships certainly are very important. Can you still hear me? My screen froze.
No, you're
okay. Sorry. Thank you. They're critically important. The question is that for me, students, kids. We all have kids in our lives, right? Students want adults to listen to them. They want someone to care for them. Adults want that. And so the idea that only a police officer is the person who can develop that relationship and should be the person to develop that relationship to a student who's experiencing mental health issues. And Lord knows, all of us, it hurts us so hard when we have a student commit suicide. And then I have to answer the question, well, why is our student ratio 1 to 1,600, right? And we added 6 new, nurses to help that. Why is our counselor to student ratio so bad compared to the region? And so I think that just the premise that it has to be a police officer who forms that relationship. Of course, kids are going to have good relationships with police officers because a lot of them are good people and they want to help kids. That's not the question for a policymaker. The question is weighing who is the right person with the right set of training and the right set of skills, whose primary mission is to meet the needs of students. And so that is not the primary mission of a police officer, even a school resource officer, who I will agree, many of them see it as more of their mission to be that type of role, but that's not what they're trained to do. The few weeks of training, that a few hours a year that they receive from the state, that's not what they're trained to do against all the other stuff they've done in their lives. And there are people much better positioned to do that for our students. And so it's a budgetary choice. If we lapse these positions and then abolish them, we're going to be able to make a dent on that new nurse to student ratio and that counselor to student ratio. And that's what our kids need. That's one point. The other point is, in the face of no data that students feel more safe, or that police officers in schools make children more safe, the Washington Post did an analysis of school shootings, hundreds of them across the country. Of the more than several hundred, 2 school resource officers that were present, Mr. Friedman, you need to go on mute. 2 school resource officers stopped and intervened in those where they were present in hundreds of schools. Actually stopped. More non-sworn off people intervened and stopped a shooter than officers did. No data on that. No data at all to support that. Okay? The data we do have shows consistently here in Montgomery County and elsewhere that when police are present in schools, black and brown children are arrested at higher rates, disproportionately. That's the data we do have. And so all these anecdotes about individual officers doing great things, I agree. I've seen it. I've experienced it myself. That is not what we should be basing decisions on. We should be basing it on who are the best people in our schools with these deficits. When we have kids that need mental health support, who should be helping with that? When we have a street outreach network, which is supposed to be dealing in a non-law enforcement way with gang activity, beef that up. I'm all for that. Make that accountable. Have data for that. It's not anecdotal stories about police officers that on a one-off basis. And we have no analysis of it. When Councilmember Hucker asked the chief, what are we doing about the disparities? Those are not adequate answers. It's similar to when I've asked about why are juveniles arrested, why are half of the juvenile arrests in Montgomery County black residents? Why are 55% of the people who have force used against them in the county black residents? There are not answers to those questions, and we should dig into it, and I know we're working on that. But in the school context, where kids go to be safe and to learn, we have no data on one side, we have anecdotes, and then we have data showing disparate activity, and then we have severe budget shortfalls on things we know our students need, which there's mountains of data that show when you have the right amount of nurses and counselors that our students feel safer and benefit from that. And so I just feel like we're looking at the wrong things, and I know we'll take this up in full council, but there's tons of data. There's the study out of Brookings in North Carolina that showed they had a grant program to increase school resource officers. And the schools that got the money and increased, and that didn't get the money and didn't increase, no difference in safety. And actually, some students felt less safe. And we're lying to ourselves if we don't think that when students go back to school in the fall or the winter, God willing, that many are not going to feel hurt and have serious reservations about seeing officers in their schools. And so I just think we have to take that into account. The last thing I'll say is I'll end with a quote from a student that I spoke to. He said, at the end of the day, talking about the officer, he'll still have a badge, he'll still have the police car, and students will still feel unsafe based on past experiences with police officers. Let's remember, many of these kids have experiences outside of the school as well. So I think we need a new model. There are models out there where security officers are turned into folks that focus on conflict resolution. They're trained. And in some places, in the city of Oakland, they have a program where they're going to move the entire security officer position, not police officers, but the security officers, which we have in our schools as well. That whole thing is going to be moved to the behavioral health and HHS. And those folks are going to be trained up in a different way. So there are other ways to do this. So I just would say that, Mr. President. I appreciate the leniency on the time.
Thank you. Councilmember Albernauz.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I don't disagree with a lot of what Councilmember Jawando said, but for me, this is not an either or. I feel like we clearly need additional mental health support. And even if we were just replacing one officer with one counselor, that's still not nearly enough. There's a lot more infrastructure that we need. And I also agree with you that it would be reasonable to reimagine how we tackle or how we approach the SRO program. And I also agree with you that we don't have a lot of data, which is precisely why I think we should let the Board of Education complete its work with the superintendent to conduct that analysis so that we can make an informed decision and then come up with a reasonable plan moving forward to transition to a model that addresses the needs. And you're right, the time has changed, and I'm sensitive to that, and my eyes are wide open with regards to what's going on in our society right now. And we are moving in a positive direction in so many ways. And I think that this is a program that needs to evolve. But I think just eliminating it outright and then rebuilding it from there is the wrong approach. I would prefer to get the data and information and then reassess, reevaluate, reimagine how we are conducting this program. I don't think there's as much of a difference between what I'm saying and what you're saying. I just feel like we should process this in a way that's reasonable and takes into account that data that I agree we need. And so that those are just some of my additional thoughts.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Rice.
So let me just say this. I would encourage everyone to make sure that they reach out to folks who are working in our community, especially when it comes to our disconnected youth. I would encourage them to have conversations with them about their thoughts, about relationships between police officers and the individuals that they work with. I would encourage them to take those conversations very seriously and the feedback that they get. I'll just leave that one there. When it comes to data surrounding mass shootings, let me just tell you that you'll never have data on a mass shooting that's been averted. So of course there's no data. There's never going to be the data on the potential schoolyard fight that was averted because somebody came and alerted a school resource officer. You're not going to have that data either. So of course when the Washington Post does its thing that's sensationalized in terms of saying that there's no proof that school resource officers make things safe, again, you have to dig deeper. I think that's where we're all talking about in terms of really starting to just understand and have conversations. I'm not saying, and I've already, look, I'm a person who advocated for having school resource officers everywhere, right? And now I've said that I understand maybe we don't need them in our middle schools. I had even said maybe they need to stop into our elementary schools. People know, Councilmember Joanna, you know, I've even talked about that aspect. And I've since pulled back in terms of saying, because I do understand the impacts. Look, I'm a black man who grew up in this county who's been pulled over by police wrongly more times than I choose to remember. And so from that perspective, I understand that when a kid walks through a hallway and sees a person with a badge and a gun, it may remind them of those kinds of things, and that's an issue. But here's the growing point. Here's the potential. Can we mend that relationship? Can we actually create an instance in where that person now, that officer now reaches out to that young person and says, listen, the way you were mistreated before was wrong. We are not all like that. I want to be helpful to you, and I want to create a better relationship with you and help you to understand that we don't all do things that way. Isn't that better? Isn't that an opportunity that we want to have for our community? And so again, this shouldn't be about this or that. It shouldn't be about it's got to be this way or that way. I think there's a middle ground. I really do. I align myself with where Councilmember Albornoz is, and I'm open for change. I'm not saying that the school resource officer stays exactly the way it is right now. We do need to change it. We don't know how schools are going to be. I don't know what schools are going to look like. If we never go back to a school building, obviously there won't be a school resource officer anyway. But still, there will be a need for community policing. There will be a need to continue to build relationships between police and young people. How best to do that is where they are for the most part of their day. And that's in school. That's where they can reach folks and build those relationships. Keep in mind, I can't just by driving around in the community and you're inside doing homework or you're playing on video games, I can't establish a relationship with you that way. The only way in which I can is a place where you are for a majority of your day. And that's in our schools. That's what this was set up for. This wasn't set up to, and again, I'm not speaking for other jurisdictions. I hate it when we compare ourselves to other jurisdictions. Because other jurisdictions, we all know, do a whole bunch of stuff the wrong way. They don't do things like we do in Montgomery County. And so let's just talk about us. Let's talk about what we do. Let's talk about our numbers. Let's talk about our surveys. Let's talk about our kids, right? Because that's the most important thing. How do our kids feel? How can we make sure that they feel safe, that they feel loved, that they feel supported, they feel protected, that they feel as though they have a myriad of people to talk to? There's nobody who doesn't say they want that. And I agree with you, Councilmember Tawanda, wholeheartedly, that it doesn't mean that then has to be a police officer. I'm not saying that as well. I'm not saying it has to be a police officer. But why couldn't it be? Isn't that a benefit for us if we are going to have police in our community to establish those relationships? I think so. I think that's where we err on the side of trying to make this a better system. One in which, again, is designed in coordination with our school system and designed in coordination with our community, with our communities of color representatives, as well as our positive youth and behavioral development folks. All of that's important. Let me just close with one thing. Folks seem to forget the 3-year commission that I sat on that talks specifically about what it means to have community schools, ones that have behavioral health counselors and nurses and school health areas for students. That is the re-envisioning of our schools. So that's already a part of past law. That's what we're supposed to have in our schools. So again, to pit one against the other isn't really realistic. The fact of the matter is we need to do this. Now, yes, the governor vetoed it, but I hope that the legislature will override this veto and move forward with this. I encourage people to read the Kerwin Commission recommendations because, again, when it talks about the supports that everybody is saying we need for our schools, they're in there. So when you're advocating, advocate with your state elected officials to override the veto for Kerwin. And the money is coming primarily from the state. That's what we want, right? We can have both. I really think we can. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. We're going to have to get back to the discussion that we have at hand, talking about a budget, by the way. But I just want to add one. I don't believe it's an either or either. I believe that we're going to have to figure out how to do what we need to do to keep our community safe. I think it's a different model, but I think we need to figure out how we do it, and we do it working together with everyone. I think we have to wait for the data. I think we have to wait for the Board of Education and their evaluation and what they're going through. I mean, if tomorrow morning the Board of Education said we don't want school resource officers, our discussion becomes moot, but the reality is that they haven't said that. The reality is that the state of Maryland hasn't said that we could do it that way. So we have to figure out what we have. We have to figure out how we're going to do it better. And I think to the point that we are better off having the discussions and then making changes to what we do rather than make the change and then have the discussion. That to me is putting that cart in front of the horse, and that never really works. So with that, Ms. Frog, we need to figure out, can you tell us one last time, please, what your suggestion is? It seems like it's a long time ago when that came up, what your suggestion is for the budgetary side.
So my recommendation, based on the fact, my recommendation is to take the entire $8.54 million savings that the county executive has recommended, but instead of abolishing any positions, the department instead takes this as labs. That will achieve the savings that is needed, but it will also preserve the sworn positions for more flexibility based on recommendations from these various entities that are examining public safety issues, but also with the committee's understanding that OMB plans to abolish those positions in the FY22 budget, and that will be for discussion when the committee reviews that later next spring.
I think that you are absolutely right, and that's what I'm supportive of. To Councilmember Albornoz and Councilmember Hucker, where are you, please?
I think that's fine, Mr. Chairman.
I agree, and I also think, conducting policy analysis through a budget saving mechanism is not the best way to do it.
I agree.
And so, this will move forward with the reductions that need to happen, but allow us the ability to further assess and evaluate as we look at the entire universe here, and also bring on board the advisory commissions that we are going through the interview process right now. I think it would be prudent to hang on until there can be a further assessment, acknowledging that many of these positions likely still will be abolished in FY22, but it gives us a more well-rounded and holistic approach. So I do support the recommendation.
So that's a 3-0. Councilmember Hawker, Vice President?
Yes, 3-0, but I missed one of my questions. If either Susan or Trevor, maybe the chief knows. So if the county executive, maybe this has been said, but if the county executive asked all the departments to come up with 6% savings plans, but he only asked the police to come up with 3%, why was that?
No, he asked 6% from all agencies, but he didn't approve every single item that all departments put up for their 6%.
He did ask everybody 6. Okay,
yes.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, Susan, are we clear then on our suggestion or what we're going to take to full council for the budget?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, thank you, Chief. Thank you, and all of my colleagues for being here. We, as they know, my colleagues know, and Susan especially, because you did as always, an unbelievable job on this packet. But we have Police Advisory Commission. We're going to have the discussions for people that have asked to be on the Police Advisory Commission. We have that in an hour, I guess, in 45 minutes. So I will see my colleagues then. But thank you very, very much for being with us. We appreciate everyone's help, and we will call this meeting adjourned.
Streetery hours on Cordell will be Wednesday through Sunday from 4 p.m. to 10 p.m.
Will close several streets to vehicle traffic in downtown Wheaton and